Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Startup Growth Playbook Live, session number 17. How Customer Development Fuels Repeatable Growth. I'm Bhuva Shakti, a global product operations and fundraising advisor, helping businesses build systems for growth that actually last. For more than 25 years, I've worked at the intersection of technology, finance, and operations. First on Wall Street, leading digital and AI powered transformations, and later in angel and venture capital ecosystems, helping founders launch products, expand markets, and attract investors. That blend of structure and innovation is what I now bring to startups and small businesses, helping you grow with clarity, scalability, and financial confidence. Beyond workshops like this, I also offer one to one coaching sessions customized around your priorities, whether it's product and customer readiness, operations and expansions readiness, or fundraising and investor readiness. We can focus on one area or build a combined plan that meets your current and future needs. If you'd like to explore what that might look like for your business, I offer a free 20-minute consultation over Zoom. You can reach me on LinkedIn at Bhuva Shakti. You can also get unlimited access to all the sessions and full recordings by going to my membership website. The link is on the screen. You can sign up for your first month free and rewatch at getwalletmax.com/membership. Now let's dive in. The foundation. Why customer development fuels growth. When we talk about customer development, we are talking about shortening the distance between what you think is true and what's actually true in the market. Most founders move fast, sometimes too fast, and start building or promoting before they have evidence that a real customer with a real problem is willing to take real action. What we are doing today is recentering your process around insight, not assumptions. Because once you understand the customer's world clearly, your product decisions stop feeling like guesswork. They start feeling like strategy. Think of customer development as your early operating rhythm. It guides how you shape your idea, how you validate demand, and how you build your early acquisition and retention motions. Every strong pre seed and seed stage company I've worked with has had one thing in common: they learned before they built. They talked to customers before they scaled. They created a habit of listening that influenced everything, from design choices to pricing to onboarding. That's what turns early traction into repeatable growth. By the end of this session, my goal is for you to walk away with a process you can run immediately. How to structure conversations, how to interpret what you are hearing, how to decide what's noise versus signal, and how to turn all of that into a product and growth strategy that actually sticks. We're going to move quickly because this is accelerator style, condensed, practical, and designed to give you momentum right away. Now, let's look at the most common founder myths. One of the biggest traps early founders fall into is assuming they are the customer. Maybe you are, but the moment you start building a solution, your relationship to the problem shifts. You gain context, urgency, and clarity that your customers don't have. That means you stop being a reliable reference point. It's a subtle shift, but a dangerous one. We build cleaner when we accept that our own perspective is not enough. Another common myth is if the product is better, people will adopt it. That is not how behavior works. In US markets, especially, switching costs, emotional, operational, political, are far heavier than founders expect. People stick with imperfect tools because they are familiar. They stick with spreadsheets because they don't break. Better is not enough. Better only wins when the pain of the current situation outweighs the effort of change. And my favorite myth, everyone I talk to says this is interesting. Polite enthusiasm kills more startups than competition ever will. When people say this is cool or keep me posted, it feels like validation, but it's not. You're looking for behavioral signals, not compliments. Customer development forces your past polite noise and into real evidence. Stories, frustrations, workarounds, budget conversations, and repeated patterns matter. Now, what's the customer development mindset? The biggest shift in customer development is moving from I need to validate my idea to I need to understand my customer's world. Those are two completely different mindsets. One is ego driven, you're trying to prove you're right. The other is evidence driven. You're trying to learn what's true. The founders who scale are the ones who stay curious longer than their competitors. Think of your job as gathering patterns, not collecting compliments. Focus on behavior over opinions. Focus on stories over predictions. And focus on experiments over assumptions. This mindsets make everything else work better. Your roadmap, your onboarding, your pricing, your go to market strategy. It reduces friction across your entire company. When you build this habit early, you create a culture that listens, a culture that adjusts quickly, a culture that doesn't waste time building things no one will use. Customer development becomes the operating system underneath your product and your growth engine. It's not a step, it's a muscle, and you build it one honest conversation at a time. Now, what's the structure of a high quality interview? A great customer interview feels natural to the customer, but it's highly intentional on your end. You start with context, walk me through your day, or tell me about your role. Context calms people down and gets them talking freely. Once they are comfortable, you guide them toward the workflow you're studying. You're not asking them what they want, you are asking them what they do. The moment you anchor the conversation in real stories, the quality of insight improves dramatically. Once they describe the workflow, you explore the pain with curiosity. Ask about friction points, time sinks, mistakes, stress, and workarounds. Look for the moments when their tone changes or their frustration rises. That emotional spike tells you where the real pain sits. If someone gets animated or irritated talking about a step in their workflow, that's a sign of urgency. This is the moment when you stop listening as a founder and start listening as a detective. I also want you to pay attention to the moments when customers describe consequences. What happens if they don't solve the problem? What gets delayed? Who gets impacted? What is the cost? People reveal the real stakes when they talk about consequences. You end the interview with a closing question like, if you could wave a magic wand, what would you change first? This question surfaces desired outcomes, not features. And outcomes are what you build your MVP around. Now, how do you map the customer's current workflow? Before you build anything, you need to map how the customer handles the problem today. This step is deceptively simple but incredibly powerful. Start with the trigger. What event kicks off the workflow? Then ask them to walk you through each step one at a time. You'll notice moments where they hesitate or sigh because they are remembering something painful. Those are the friction points. You're essentially building an X ray of how the customer's day actually works. When customers describe the tools they use, email, spreadsheets, Slack, internal systems, they reveal the constraints your product will face. You learn where information gets lost, where delays happen, and where manual work takes over. These details show you whether the problem is operational, emotional, political, or purely workflow related, and they show you whether the pain is frequent enough and expensive enough to solve. Once you have mapped workflow, you can quantify the pain with this mapping. How much time does this cost each week? What breaks when the process fails? Who gets impacted? These questions transform vague frustration into measurable value, and measurable value is what drives product priority, pricing strategy, and your early traction narrative. It's the bridge between discovery and revenue. A pre-seed construction tech startup mapped a superintendent's day and found that 22% of the day was lost to manual documentation. Once quantified, that insight justified their MVP. Three job sites adopted the prototype within the first 2 months. Now, how do you move from discovery to validation? Discovery is about empathy and understanding. Validation is about evidence. You move into validation when you start seeing consistent patterns, when it's clear what the pain is, who feels it most, and how frequently it shows up. This transition marks the moment when you stop collecting stories and start testing behaviors. It's also the moment when you begin replacing assumptions with data. Validation starts with one testable assumption, not 10. You choose the assumption with the highest impact on your business. For example, if this problem is real, people will sign up for a waitlist. Or if this pain is urgent, people will book a call. You're not trying to build the product yet. You are trying to measure whether people will take a meaningful action even without a full solution in place. Behavior is the closest thing you'll get to truth at this stage. The biggest mistake founders make here is overbuilding. You don't need a polished prototype. You need a simple landing page or a short explanation or a basic walkthrough that tests whether people care enough to move. Once you see people acting, clicks, signups, replies, deposits, you have something worth building. Validation is not about convincing, it's about observing commitment. A pre-seed SaaS team launched a no-code landing page to test demand from CFOs. In 2 weeks, 42 out of 247 visitors joined a waitlist. That's 17% conversion. That was enough evidence to justify building a prototype and running a pilot outreach. Now, what are the validation metrics that actually matter? In validation, behavior is the metric, not enthusiasm. You're looking at conversion rates, response rates, demo attendance, willingness to prepay, and the speed at which people complete steps. These are leading indicators of product market alignment. If your landing page converts at 20%, or your waitlist grows without heavy promotion, or prospects consistently show up for calls, those are strong signals that the pain is real. Pre-sales and pilot commitments are even stronger signals. Early stage founders underestimate how powerful it is for someone is willing to invest money or time into something that isn't fully built yet. It means the pain is urgent. It means the value is clear, and it means your solution is worth exploring seriously. A 3 to 10% pre-order rate at pre-seed is incredibly strong, and investors know this. Retention during a pilot is another critical validation metric. If your pilot users consistently come back week after week, the problem is real and the workflow fits. If they drop off after a few days, you either solved the wrong problem or built the wrong workflow. Validation isn't just about initial interest, it's about early behavior that predicts long term traction. These metrics help you decide what to build next and how to position it and where to focus your early go to market efforts. A pre seed fintech startup ran a landing page test and saw a 21% sign up rate with 6% pre orders at $49 per month. Those numbers were strong enough to help them close a 1.8 million seed round because the data proved real willingness to pay. Now let's move from validation to early acquisition. Once you've validated that a problem is real and people are willing to take action, you shift into early acquisition. And this transition is where many founders overcomplicate things. Early acquisition isn't about scaling. It's not about ads or funnels or automation. It's about building your first repeatable motion, a simple, reliable way to reach people who feel the pain most. If you try to scale before repeatability, you end up burning time, energy, and money with very little to show for it. The foundation of early acquisition is the customer language you uncovered during discovery. This is your biggest asset right now. When your messaging mirrors the exact words customers used to describe their frustration, your outreach stops feeling like promotion and starts feeling like recognition. Most founders underestimate how much this alone improves response rates, meeting bookings, and early conversion. My guidance at this stage is simple. Choose one or two channels where your early adopters already spend time. Don't spray and pray. Don't chase every platform. Focus on the narrowest segment you can because early adopters convert at a rate the mainstream never will. And once you can reliably get one paying customer again and again through the same motion, that is what investors call early traction. A pre seed SaaS startup used phrases directly from investors in their outreach. Like you mentioned, weekly handoff delays slow you down, is what one customer said. That small shift increased reply rates to 38% and filled 2 weeks of demo calls. Now, how do you define your early adopter segment? Your early adopters are the people who feel the problem more intensely than anyone else. They complain more, they create more workarounds, they feel the pressure of broken workflows. These are not nice to have users, they are the ones who feel accountable when things go wrong. And when you find this group, your acquisition becomes easier, your product makes more sense, and your early revenue path becomes clearer. This group is always smaller and narrower than founders initially expect. You're not targeting HR managers, you're targeting HR managers in companies between 50 to 200 employees who handle onboarding manually and feel crunched during hiring season. The more specific you get, the more predictable your conversation becomes. And of course, conversion. Narrow is not limiting, it's clarifying. Once you define this group, everything becomes simpler. You know where they hang out, you know what triggers their search for solutions, you know how they talk about the pain, you know what the switching costs look like. And because you understand their world deeply, you can reach them with precision instead of general messaging. Precision is what gets you to repeatable growth faster. Now, let's talk about your first repeatable acquisition channel. Your first acquisition channel should be simple enough that you can run it manually. I know that sounds counterintuitive, especially if you come from engineering or growth backgrounds, but the early goal is not automation, it's clarity. You want a channel where you can consistently predict the outcome, send X messages, get Y replies, book Z demos. That repeatability is far more valuable than scale at this stage. To find this channel, look at where your early adopters naturally congregate. Maybe it's LinkedIn, maybe it's niche Slack groups, maybe it's email lists, industry associations, or peer communities. The right channel is the one where your audience already lives, not the one you hope they'll adopt. Once you pick your channel and you build a small, consistent workflow around it, a script, a follow up sequence, a rhythm, and the key is when something works, don't get distracted. Founders often adapt a channel and then they abandon a winning channel because it feels too simple. But simple is good. Simple is efficient. Simple is scalable later. Your first acquisition channel gives you the early data and learning you need to redefine positioning, pricing, onboarding, and product. That's the flywheel you keep refining and you keep building. Now let's map your early funnel. The purpose of mapping your early funnel is to understand where people fall off, not because something is wrong, but because each step teaches you where to adjust. Awareness, engagement, conversion, activation, retention, each stage has its own fingerprint. When you map the funnel visually, you become more strategic about what needs to shift and where to focus energy. It's like turning on the lights in a dark room. For example, if people respond to outreach but don't book demos, that's a messaging problem. If they book demos but don't convert, that's a positioning or expectation issue. If they convert but don't activate, that's a workflow or onboarding gap. Let's say they activate but don't retain, that's a product alignment issue. So the funnel tells you exactly where your growth engine needs tuning. And the best part, early funnel mapping gives you leading indicators before revenue scales. You start seeing patterns that predict whether you're building something people will stick with. When you understand your funnel deeply, you stop guessing, you stop panicking, you start operating with intention. And that's what investors look for as companies approach seed and Series A. A pre seed AI compliant startup learned from their funnel that 72% of drop offs happened between demo request and demo attendance. Fixing the scheduling process increased attendance by 41% and doubled conversions the next quarter. Why retention matters more than acquisition? Because retention is the moment the market tells you the truth. Acquisition can be manufactured. Anyone with a credit card can buy ads or push people into a funnel. But retention, it happens only when your product fits into someone's actual workflow and stays there. It's proof that you solved something meaningful and built something usable. If early users don't stick, it's not a marketing problem, it's a value problem. And the earlier you face that, the stronger your company becomes. The economic impact is just as real. When retention is healthy, everything else becomes easier. Your LTV increases, that's the lifetime value. CAC pressure drops, that's the customer acquisition cost. Referrals start happening, and your revenue becomes more predictable. Founders underestimate how powerful it is when the product just works for customers. It creates an internal reputation that's hard to replicate with marketing alone. Retention is what turns early traction into a real business model. And this is the part founders often overlook. Retention is built during customer development. The more accurately you map the workflow, the more aligned your MVP becomes. The better you understand emotional triggers, the better your onboarding feels. The clearer the problem, the stickier the product. Retention isn't a lucky outcome. It's a byproduct of deeply understanding your customer before you build. Now let's see how to turn customer insights into roadmap priorities. Your roadmap shouldn't be a wish list or a feature parade. It should be a reflection of the clearest patterns you heard during discovery. The problem most founders run into is treating every piece of feedback equally, which leads to bloated MVPs and diluted focus. But when you prioritize by frequency, emotional intensity, and economic impact, your roadmap becomes leaner, sharper, and easier to execute. You're looking for the core workflow that delivers the highest value with the least complexity. That's your anchor. Everything else is a distraction until that workflow is working well. This is where founders often need to show discipline, cutting scope, shelving interesting ideas, and ignoring outlier requests. When you solve the highest frequency pain first, customers forgive everything else. When you try to solve everything, customers feel nothing deeply. And remember, the roadmap is a living document. As you get more pilot data, customer calls, retention insights, you'll refine priorities. The roadmap should evolve with the customer, not with internal preferences. That's how you stay aligned with the market as you move from MVP toward product market fit. A pre-seed SaaS startup removed 6 planned features after only 3 or 40 users mentioned them. By focusing on 2 critical workflows, they cut build time in half and raised pilot retention from 58% to 83%. Now let's talk about building a retention system. Onboarding, feedback, iteration are some key steps. Retention, it isn't random, it's the result of a deliberate system. That system starts with onboarding, which is your first and most important chance to guide users toward value. Onboarding should feel like a guided path, not a tour. Your goal is to help customers reach activation quickly and confidently. When onboarding works, friction drops and trust increases. Then comes feedback. You can't improve retention if you don't know where people get stuck. In app prompts, short surveys, direct outreach, these are not nuisances. They are your early warning sensors. Collecting feedback gives you insight into where users hesitate, where they misunderstand, and where expectations break. And the sooner you surface these friction points, the cheaper they are to fix. Finally, iteration. Early stage products need weekly or bi weekly iteration cycles. Things will break, approaches will shift, customers will surprise you. But when you're listening continuously and iterating quickly, you become the kind of company customers trust because they can feel that you're paying attention. Retention becomes a habit on your side too. A Series A workflow SaaS startup held Friday friction reviews every week. They fixed one small friction point each sprint. Activation rose by 33% and churn dropped 18% over 2 quarters. Now, what are the metrics that predict repeatable growth? Repeatable growth starts with early metrics that tell you whether users are actually getting value. Activation rate, week one retention, demo to pilot conversion, time to first value. These numbers are quiet predictors of long term health. You don't need thousands of users to see the story forming. A small engaged cohort reveals where your product is strong and where it needs refinement. Time to first value is especially important. If customers experience meaningful value within minutes or hours, you're aligned with their workflow. If it takes days, you're fighting human nature. The same goes for demo to pilot conversion. If people agree to take the next step, your messaging and value proposition are landing. And if your early retention numbers hold, you're on your way toward something durable. Investors pay attention to these early signals because they show whether your product is gaining traction without brute force. When you can point to metrics that behave consistently, activation, early retention, willingness to pay, you build credibility. It shows you understand your customer, you know how to reach them, and the product actually solves something that matters. That's the difference between traction and momentum. A seed stage AI compliant startup improved activation from 41% to 68%. That single shift raised month one retention by 22% and pushed their LTV to CAC ratio from 2.8 times to 4.4 times, fueling a strong Series A raise. Now, how do you scale customer development across the company? Customer development becomes far more powerful when it moves beyond the founder's head and becomes a shared team habit. When product hears directly from users, they stop designing from assumptions. When sales collects objections consistently, messaging tightens. When customer success shares friction points, onboarding improves. When engineering has exposure to real stories, they make better technical decisions. Everyone gets sharper when everyone listens. Cross functional learning prevents the classic early stage problem, each team interpreting the customer through a different lens. Instead of silos, you create a unified picture of what customer needs. This reduces internal debate and accelerates decision making. You stop having philosophical discussions about what to build and instead lean on evidence everyone has seen firsthand. To make this scalable, set up simple habits, a shared insights repository, a weekly Slack digest, or a short team review. It doesn't need to be complex. The goal is alignment, not bureaucracy. When customer development becomes a team wide practice, you build a culture that pays attention, something competitors can't easily copy. Now, let's look at a closing framework where we build, learn, and grow. Everything we covered today boils down to a rhythm. You build something small, you learn from how real customers behave, and you grow based on what actually works, not what you assumed would work. This rhythm keeps your company grounded in reality. It keeps you close to the customer. It keeps your product aligned with the market instead of drifting into complexity. When founders internalize this rhythm, growth stops feeling chaotic. You make decisions with more clarity, you communicate with more confidence, you operate with less waste, and you stay ahead of competitors who build based on instinct alone. Build, learn, grow isn't a slogan, it's a survival strategy in early stage startups where resources are tight and speed matters. If you walk away with one thing today, let it be this: customer development never stops. Not at pre seed, not at seed, not at Series A. The market is always moving, your customers are always evolving, and your best advantage is staying closer to them than anyone else. Growth becomes predictable when learning becomes habitual. Build, learn, grow, and repeat. Thank you all for joining today's Startup Growth Playbook session on how customer development fuels repeatable growth. If you'd like to keep building on what we covered today, I offer one to one coaching sessions designed to help small businesses and startups to move from ideas to action. We can focus on product and customer readiness, operations and expansion readiness, or fundraising and investor readiness, or create a blended plan that fits where you are right now. Each session is practical, focused, and tailored to your next step. You can schedule a free 20-minute consultation call with me over Zoom so we can map out what kind of support would make the biggest difference for your business. You can reach me on LinkedIn at Bhuva Shakti. You can also get unlimited access to all the sessions and full recordings by going to my membership website. The link is on the screen. You can sign up for your first month free and rewatch at getwalletmax.com/membership. Thanks again for joining.